So I don't know if you guys are like me or not, but every year this happens. You spend all year, you go on a bunch of trips, you get your gear dialed in, you find things that you like, things you don't like, you make changes, you decide, I got it. This is what I'm taking. These are my items, tents, packs, whatever it is, for the bulk of my trips. Obviously some things happen and change that, but for the most part, I got it. Then sales hit. You know, it's the holidays, it's Black Friday sales, it's Cyber Monday sales, it's because we changed the color of this item, here's clearance on all the other colors. And then you buy more stuff. So I did that. Thought I had my tent thing dialed down, thought I knew what tent I wanted to roll with, or tents for every situation. And then, you know, saw some stuff on sale, saw some of these YouTube videos, and I got a new tent. So along with the new tent came this idea to compare some of these tents. So I have 3 tents here now that all 3 are right in the same price range, around $250 to $300, depending on time of year, sales, whatnot. All 3 of them are one-man tents, and all 3 of them are considered very lightweight or ultralight tents in their specific category. What do I mean by category? Well, you have your freestanding tents, which I have the REI Quarter Dome SL1. One of my favorite tents I've really ever used. It's just a fantastic tent, fantastic deal for what you get. This thing is awesome. And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have the trekking pole tents, the single wall ultralight tent. This one is the Gossamer Gear The One tent, which I really like this tent. This was what I thought was going to be kind of my last tent purchase I would ever really make. It's a 18, call it 18 ounce tent, single walled, sil nylon, and packs very small. And actually, when you're inside it, is fairly roomy for a 1-person tent. It's got everything. I ended up picking up the Durston X-mid 1P tent. So I bought this tent. The last thing I needed was another new tent. But now, as I got it out yesterday in a ridiculous windstorm right before dark and set it up just enough to get it all put together, I realized this is an interesting comparison. And I don't see it anywhere on YouTube, but all 3 of these tents, they're around the same price range. Yep, $250 to $300, give or take sales. All of them are 1-person tents, but all of them have their positives and negatives. So maybe you're someone watching this that's been interested in one of these 3 tents. Now you'll get to see all 3 of them. Maybe you're someone that's just interested in one of them. You'll get to see all 3 of them. Maybe you wonder, what the heck is the difference between single wall and double wall, and why do I care? Now you get to see them all together. The other positive is I'm 6'2", so a lot of times in ultralight tents, that's a tough size. I've got a long, wide Nemo sleeping pad that we're gonna put in all 3 of them. I've got a 20-degree enlightened equipment quilt that we're gonna put in all 3 of them, and we'll see how the size compares. Before we set them up, let's take a look real quick at the package size. So starting with the most compact, lightest weight, the Gossamer Gear The One, you can see it's pretty small, and even have a handy dandy 1-liter Nalgene bottle. Everybody's got one of these or had one and knows their size. So that gives you a pretty good comparison to the size. And this will compress down even smaller too. So very, very tiny pack down size. This is the X-mid, 1-person, not much bigger. And I'll put all the weights as I'm doing this too. Nalgene bottle, X-mid. So it's a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger than the Gossamer Gear tent, but not by a lot. They designed it so you could still fit it down horizontally in a pack. There's some of these ultralight tents that have struts and things included in them for different reasons, but it makes them longer so you can't fit them horizontally in a pack. I'm one of those people that bothers. I like to be able to slide them down in there. So this still works for that. And then you have the Quarter Dome SL1. So it looks huge, but I'll regularly put this in like a compression sack. It will go down to basically just a hair bigger than that Durston one-man tent. So this is still pretty compressible. Don't let it fool you. However, you do still have to deal with the poles. Both the other two tents set up with trekking poles. So if you're already carrying trekking poles, that's just one more thing you got to carry around. If you don't hike with trekking poles, then that's a benefit to the Quarter Dome or any freestanding tent, is those poles are more compact and you can tuck them away easier than a set of trekking poles if you don't use them. But if you've never used trekking poles, you really ought to try. They make life easier. So that's their pack down size. Now we're gonna set them up. Movie magic like that. All right, so Tent City is assembled. Got the Gossamer Gear The One over there, REI Quarter Dome SL1, and then the Durston X-mid one person. So don't judge my setup on the Durston tent. It's the second time I've set it up. I think I'm getting the hang of it, but it is definitely a little different for a trekking pole tent. But the idea is very simple. 4 stakes, each corner. Put your trekking pole in, extend it till it's tight. Put the other trekking pole in, extend it till it's tight, and you're up. And that was true. I mean, I was able to leave it that way. The only other stakes you have in are down here for your vestibule, so when it's closed, which this is the handiest thing ever. I had a tarp tent. Their Dyneema tents have these, but magnetic attachments, those are the greatest things ever. I don't know why more tent manufacturers don't do it. You got the watertight zipper, but with that pulled down, and then you got the vent on either side. It's a pretty solid tent. I mean, it moves, but it's not going to go anywhere. And then when it was real windy yesterday, I had these peak guy outs pulled out too. So with these pulled out along its kind of axis that it goes, that made it very, very sturdy. So maybe that's the thing that keeps it a little sturdier. I don't know if it's somewhat of user error. Feel free to comment if I'm doing something wrong. I don't think I am. This isn't the most even spot either, but this would be perfectly fine for a setup. I wouldn't really be worried about it. So that's the Durston tent. Then we go to the REI Quarter Dome SL1. Now, to be fair, I have the most time with this tent, plus freestanding tents, or this one's technically semi-freestanding because you have to stake the foot end out. But they are typically easier to set up, but this thing goes up pretty quick. However, it is a freestanding tent, so one of the downfalls to a freestanding tent, the other two, it could be a driving rain and I could have set those up and the inside would not get wet. The double walls like this, where they're a separate fly sheet and the tent body, you can't really get away with it. However, the Quarter Dome series, like a lot of tents, has a footprint, which I do have. I didn't bring it for this, but I would normally take it and you can set it up first, put the poles in it, and then put the fly on it. And then you're protected from the rain. And I will say, by far the easiest double wall tent to do that with. I've done it with no problems, and I'm not exactly small. I've done it in the rain and been able to get that inner set up and attached with no issue, no water in it. So that is good. However, we're talking about lightweight stuff. That's another thing you got to bring with you. But this is a really great tent. Big vestibule area. plenty of room in there, which you'll see when you put the when I put the sleeping pad and everything in there. One big vent at the peak to help with condensation. It's only got one door, so this side's just all fly sheet with a pull out that does attach to the inner to help give you more space. And then you see it's just got the one pole, so if you don't stake those corners out, it kind of collapses in on itself. It doesn't really work. But if you're going to rocky terrain where staking a tent out may be a problem, out of the three, this would be your best option because you'd only have two corners that you got to worry about rocks or something to try to make it work. Otherwise, it's basically freestanding. And then you have the lightest of the bunch, the Gossamer Gear The One tent, which takes the most stakes to get set up correctly with 8. Well, that might not be true. The Quarter Dome actually takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Takes 8 as well, so whatever. But this tent, for a one-person tent, is definitely the roomiest. Big vestibule area. It's got the clip here that you can unclip and roll that side back too, so it's all completely open. Very easy to do from inside and outside of the tent. Gives you a lot of space in front of it. And because the trekking poles, you can kind of see it there, arc up at an angle, it makes this thing wider on the inside. So for a one-person tent, that space on the inside is huge. And then the back side just has this little awning, so it's not really, can't really store anything under here, but there's a whole bunch of mesh up there to allow for ventilation as well. So, and then all that down there is waterproof. So I've had this thing, I've had this out in some rain. I've never had an issue. That awning comes out plenty far enough that you wouldn't have to worry about anything splashing on you or anything like that. It does have the ability to stake out the the bathtub floor as well. So I stake out the foot end. You can see the head's kind of floating, but when you put gear in it, it mashes that down. That's just how I set it up. So that's a quick walk around of the tents. We'll start with the Durston tent because I haven't done it yet, so I'm curious. And put the sleeping pad, the quilt, and a pillow in there and set my pack around it and just see how livable each tent is. All right, so right out of the gate, this is what intrigued me about this Durston tent is the amount of space that you get. So this is a one-person tent. You've got all this vestibule space over here. I mean, I've got a stove, food bag, fuel can, rain jacket, pretty much all of my stuff shoved over there. My shoes are right here. When this is closed, it'll cover those. And then I got a whole second vestibule on the other side for my pack and whatever else I want to put. So you could have stuff spread out here to cook and everything. Have your pack over here in the corner, get in and out on this side, and never mess with this. Both of the other two tents have very good vestibule space, but it's just the one. So you're going in and out that door. You got to move everything all the time to be able to use it. So take these off my head. So that is one plus. I don't feel claustrophobic in here. I kind of wondered. I mean, a large pad, and it's a long, wide pad, fits in here very easily. I'll get out and show it. But being 6'2", I've got enough room in here. I can lay down. I'm on top of my quilt, but let's just, for fun. Now, I've even got my down jacket down at the foot end. So, because of the shape of this netting, like, it's fairly small, but it doesn't feel small. It doesn't feel like I'm just kind of laying here absorbing it. It doesn't feel like I don't feel claustrophobic in here because this part right here has so much space where my head is I don't feel like I've got mesh right over my head. Some of these ultralight trekking pole tents are at such a slope, like a pyramid, that especially for somebody that's taller, it's like right in your face, and there's always the danger of brushing it. But in here, there's really not. I mean, I can hit this, but then the plus is too, that's just the bug netting. So being a double wall, condensation is not as big of an issue. Where like the Gossamer Gear tent, if I'm touching the fly, as it's a single layer, I'm gonna get condensation everywhere. So yeah, this works pretty well. You can kind of see like how much space I've got, and this is a pretty big pillow. This is one of these Thermarest pillows, which is the first time I'm laying on it. This is awesome. I mean, it's not heavy. I wouldn't say it's not ultralight because of its weight, but it's not as small as a little inflatable pillow, but good Lord, it's comfortable. But you got some space because of the shape of this thing. You got some space back there to store stuff. There's still some space over here too for phone chargers and stuff, but you got so much room outside the tent. It's not that big of a deal. I can sit up. Oh, hello, close up. I can sit up and not brush the inside of the tent either. So that's kind of nice. Foot end, I got plenty of room. I mean, my down jacket's shoved in the corner. If I move that, I think you can see, like, there's the end of the long wide pad. So you've got plenty of space where I'm not touching either. And even with a quilt on, it's covered. So even with a quilt, I don't rub really. I mean, if I do rub, it's just the bug netting, and that's not a big deal. So I was a little concerned, I'm not gonna lie, that this would be too small when I set it up yesterday. But just the amount of space, and then I mean, I got a whole nother vestibule out there. Like, there's my pack, and I got a whole nother vestibule out there. So interior space, this one's pretty solid. I like it. Let's move on to the Quarter Dome. All right, so right out of the gate, now we're in the Quarter Dome SL1. Right out of the gate, I've never thought of this in all the times I've used it as a claustrophobic one-man tent. And now compared to the Durston tent, it feels a little small. It's definitely roomier than other one-man freestanding tents that I've tried. I compared it when I bought this to the Nemo Hornet one person, and there's definitely more space in it. But I will say now, I do feel like that one has a little more room. This is definitely my smallest one-person tent. Okay, this is definitely my smallest one-man tent. There's plenty of space for me to get in, lay down, sit up. You know, you don't have the two vestibules, but you got a little more room in here at the floor to store stuff in here with you. And then, like, I can take my shoes off. And again, I don't really want to get in my quilt because it's warm, but just for the sake of the video, I can get in there, and I have plenty of space with a 20-degree quilt and a long, wide Thermarest pad to lay down and sleep. I'm close here at the head, I'm touching, but for laying down, you know, I can scoot a little bit, get laid down, plenty of room. I mean, my feet touch the bug netting, but it doesn't touch the outer fly or anything, so condensation wise, you're safe. Pretty good sized vestibule area to store some gear. I can shove my pack in here. I still have some room out here to cook and stuff, but it's all got to be in front of you. That is definitely a win for the Durston, having two vestibules. But as far as a one-man freestanding tent, I love this tent too. You got plenty of space. It's got a couple pockets up here. I've had this thing through some crazy weather and been fine. So it definitely gets the job done. That's for sure. Definitely gets the job done. So now let's compare it to the Gossamer Gear tent. Now we're in the Gossamer Gear The One tent, and this is really the real comparison that I wanted to see and I wanted to make, was comparing this tent and the Durston tent. The Quarter Dome was just kind of a bonus because I had it. I will tell you, this tent has never felt bigger on the inside than it does right now. Comparing all three of these, this tent definitely has more interior volume. I mean, I've got plenty of room behind me. I'm just now touching. You've got a lot more space inside the tent. Plenty of space around the pad, plenty of room to lay down and relax, as I will demonstrate. This is also on the most uneven ground, so trying to find somewhere for the tripod to sit was kind of a pain, but I've got plenty of space to lay down. Let me see if I can do this. Bring you in here with me. There we go. Plenty of space to lay down. See, I couldn't even really bring the camera in the Quarter Dome tent, so these are definitely taller, so you've got a little more space for that, but plenty of space here. I mean, I have my hat on and I can sit up and not brush. Now at the foot end, my quilt is touching, so really I'd have to scoot my head more up to this end, and without a hat on I still have plenty of room, and now my quilt is still down there kind of right at the foot end touching, which is part of being 6'2" in an ultralight tent. The problem with that is this is a single wall tent. There we go. This is a single wall tent, so you're gonna have condensation issues. So that's going to get wet. There's nothing I can do about that. I can sleep with this open and just the mesh, and it'll help, but you're typically always gonna get a little bit of condensation. So the foot box of my quilt could get a little wet on this one compared to the others, which is not the end of the world. Most quilts, like the Enlightened Equipment ones, are treated down, so if they get damp, it'll still keep you warm, but it's just kind of a pain. So you have all the space in here, but that is one downside, is condensation is an issue, and then everything can get wet on the inside. The other two, because they're double wall, it's not really a concern. And then the big one with this tent is this is the cell nylon, which is the same as the Quarter Dome tent, because the double wall, it's not that big a deal. The Durston tents are cell poly, I believe. If that's wrong, I'll correct it. But that material doesn't stretch or sag when it gets wet. So this is already, since I set it up, kind of sagged a little, and it's not even wet. So really I need to retighten the guy lines. So in fair weather, it's fine. But in rain, as this gets wet and continues to get wet, it's going to keep you dry inside, but the material is going to sag. So where it's barely touching my quilt at the foot and my head barely clears, that's no longer going to be a thing. And it's going to sag in on me. I've never had this one in a bad storm, but I had the two-man version in a pretty good storm, and it sagged pretty considerably. I mean, luckily it was just me, but I was still touching in some spots. And I had it in a snowstorm once, and it was terrible for that. So that's one drawback to this tent. It's super lightweight. It's very roomy for a one-person tent. I mean, it's even got a clothesline up here. But this material can sag, and it is prone to condensation, which is just kind of a thing with single wall tents. So that's kind of the comparison as far as with me in it, somebody who's 6'1", 6'2", 225 pounds. as far as livable space inside of these tents, how they operate, just a comparison. I've seen a lot of videos about the Durston tent. I've seen a lot of videos about the Gossamer Gear The One. I've seen a few videos about the Quarter Dome SL1, which is kind of sad because for a freestanding one-man tent, that tent is just amazing. They're all three good tents, but they're all three in the same price point. I've never seen a direct comparison, so I just want to put that in a video. So now I'm gonna tear all this stuff down and then give some final thoughts on these tents. So we're doing the recap in the car. Just started running out of light. God bless winter, it gets dark way too early. But as far as all three tents and how I feel about them, I can't really rate them completely against each other because they all kind of do different things. But starting with the lightest weight one, the Gossamer Gear tent, I love that tent. If you're looking for the lightest weight possible out of the three, then the Gossamer Gear is the winner for sure. You get a ton of usable space. It packs down super small. The only drawbacks that I see to it, it's kind of a wind sail. Just the way it's set up, it doesn't shed wind very well, so the wind will beat it up. I don't think it's going to tear, but it will rattle the tent. It will move around on you. And because of the cell nylon stretching, as it gets wet, you do have to get out and retighten it, and it's just something you're gonna have to deal with. But if you're just looking for as light as possible and don't really care about little livability issues like that, then the Gossamer Gear tent is great. The REI Quarter Dome SL1, that's more of the, you're not as concerned about weight. It's still very lightweight, just over 2 pounds, but you want a freestanding tent. You don't want to mess with trekking poles and having to have everything perfectly staked out. You still have to stake out the foot end, but it's very easy to set up. It's very easy to use. It's great in basically all conditions. It's a one-person freestanding tent. It's just very light, and it's a great option. The Durston X-mid one-person tent, it's unique. I'll give it that. I can't give my complete thoughts on it because I haven't used it yet, but my first impressions of it, I love the storage space with the 2 vestibules. I love the flexibility that gives you with setting it up, so it's definitely a winner there. Inside, it's not as big as the Gossamer Gear tent, but it's also double wall, so it's not that big of a deal. If the foot box touches the bug netting a little bit, it's still not going to get wet. And because of all the outside storage space, it still makes it feel plenty big on the inside because I don't have to put a bunch of stuff in the tent with me because I have places to keep it all. Hopefully you got something out of this. If anything, it was a good comparison of all the tents to see the different styles and what they look like next to each other. So now we got to get a trip planned so we can take the Durston tent out and actually try it for a night and see how it does. I have a feeling it's going to do pretty well. Thanks for watching.